So good morning, everybody. This is our second week of this summer school on knowledge, reasoning, and decision making. After spending time with psychologists and linguists, we'll now come to the part on philosophy and logic. So I have called this session today Philosophical and Formal Perspectives on Reasoning and Decision Making. And we will talk mainly about coherence and abduction in reasoning and decision making. Okay, before we start, I want to, let's say, give a tribute to Daniel Kahneman. In our last summer school, we had a tribute to Daniel Dennett, who was accustomed to come to our schools and to be one of our lecturers. Last time we had a summer school on reasoning, it was in 2016, 10 years ago. So I called the summer school 10 years after. And in that school, we were supposed to have Daniel Kahneman. But Daniel Kahneman wrote to me, well, now that I have a Nobel Prize, I am booked 5 years in advance. So he couldn't come. And he was sorry for that. I was impressed given that he was a Nobel Prize winner. So unfortunately, since our last summer school, more precisely on March 27, 2024, Daniel Kahneman died. And last week, we talked a lot about Daniel Kahneman's work. He was a famous philosopher and economist who made very important contributions to the relations between these two fields. See, for example, his famous theory of economic behavior that is called prospect theory. Well, actually, what is very interesting is that Daniel Kahneman said that he never attended a class of economics in his life. And he was basically a psychologist, and he applied to economic behavior his thesis, and this way he got a Nobel Prize because he changed the history of that science and of psychology also. He earned a Nobel Prize of Economics in 2002, and there are three psychologists, three cognitive scientists who had won a Nobel Prize of Economics. There was Herbert Simon a long time ago in 1978, and more recently, Richard Thaler in 2017. But both were economists, which was not the case with Daniel Kahneman. He spent most of his career at Princeton University, and he told in his biography that his youth as a Jewish child under the Nazi occupation in Paris deeply influenced his adult life as a researcher. He tells that he was a little boy on the streets of Paris, and his mom told him, don't look at the German soldiers. They're very, very dangerous. So he was walking on the street, and a German soldier stared at him. So he got very scared. And then the German soldiers showed him a photo of a little boy about his age. We can imagine it was his own son in Germany. And he showed the photo to Daniel Kahneman. Then he took Daniel Kahneman in his arm and he hugged him. So he was very, very surprised. And his reaction was, human beings are very complicated. And he decided then to study the human mind and human behavior. His collaboration with psychologist Amos Tversky changed our knowledge of human decision-making, showing notably its irrational components. Much of our understanding of the dual process theory that we talked about a lot last week comes from his work, notably his famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It will remain forever on the mind of cognitive scientists. Okay. Now today, I would say that a shared standpoint is that we will be at the intersection of formal and cognitive approaches to reasoning. And I would say that David Marr's distinction of different types of explanations is something relevant for us today. David Marr made a distinction between algorithmic explanations and computational explanation. Algorithmic explanations, in simple words, can be defined as psychological procedures by which human beings treat information. That was the theme of our summer school last week. And computational explanations are the computational structural operations that the algorithmic procedures realize. And I would say this week we will be in between the computational approach and an algorithmic approach. So the shared perspective of today is to overpass the limits of strictly algorithmic explanation and strictly computational explanation towards an improvement of our understanding of human cognition. So it will be very interdisciplinary at the intersection of cognitive science, psychology, logic, philosophy, linguistics, and so on. I would say that abduction will be something important today, and it shows through the kind of persons I have invited for today. Atocha Liseda, Lorenzo Magnani, and Paul Thager. So the origin of the idea of abduction is once again in Aristotle. Can you imagine? Well, in Aristotle's prior analytics, Aristotle talks about apagoge in ancient Greek, which means something like the action of bringing back something. So the important, then at the end of the 19th century, Charles Saunders Peirce made much clearly an important distinction between three types of reasoning: induction, abduction, and deduction. And I think we can formalize these the following way. I perceive A, then I perceive B, I perceive A once again and B once again, and so on, and then I conclude that if A then B, that if and Peirce says in a reasoning, usually you have a rule, a case, and a result. So in induction, you have a case and a result, and the repetition of the case and the result takes you to the rule, if A then B. Deduction is different. You already have the rule, if A then B, and a case. A is the case, then you conclude with a result, B, it will be the case. And abduction is like going backward, bringing back, as Aristotle said. If A then B, you have the rule, you have the result, B occurs, then A would be the case. Now, abduction is an algorithmic and computational procedure. In a certain sense, it's algorithmic, like the description that Peirce gives here. And it's computational, the way I formalize it. And it's not a logically valid inference like modus ponens would be, like in the deduction here, but it plays an important role in human cognition, even if it's not logically valid. And we'll see that in many presentations today. Okay, now our program for today. Well, we have first this morning Paul Thager. His title is Coherence versus Probability in Models of Reasoning and Decision Making, Lessons from the New AI. Then we'll have to conclude this morning's session, Atocha Alisedayera, the place of logical abduction in the cognitive sciences. Then this afternoon we'll have Lorenzo Magnani, Abduction and Creativity, the Eco-Cognitive Foundations of Hypothetical Reasoning. And then I'll speak about reasoning with conditionals, abduction, and deduction. And at the end of the afternoon, as usual, we will have a short panel of discussion with the participants. Now, our speakers for this morning, a few words about them. Paul Thager is a philosopher, cognitive scientist, and author of many interdisciplinary books. He is Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Philosophy at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, where he founded and directed the cognitive science program. And I had it on my own. He is a faithful participant and friend of our summer schools. It's your fifth, something like that. I don't remember it either. But I would say that Paul is has been an important participant in many of our summer schools. Atocha Alisedayera, that I have known at UNAM in Mexico, is full professor at the Institut for Philosophical Research, Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas, en la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Here we're at UQAM, she is from UNAM. And a natural researcher, level 3, She has published and edited books and articles on logic and philosophy of science. Her research topics include abductive reasoning, the logic of scientific discovery, and causality in clinical reasoning. Now, our speakers for this afternoon, Lorenzo Magnani, Italian colleague, is a philosopher and cognitive scientist. He is a full professor at the University of Pavia in Italy and the director of his computational philosophy laboratory. Very interesting. He has realized many publications on abduction and its role in creative thinking. And myself, for the ones who would not know who I am, I'm professor of logic, philosophy of science, and cognitive science here at UQAM. And I have been one of the founders of this Institut de Sciences Cognitives at UQAM. And my field of investigation is the study of reasoning processes at work in human cognition and decision making.